Everybody, welcome back to the Audiomo podcast number 19. I am joined again by Dave. We're a little late this week. We apologize for that. Sometimes life gets in the way of these things. How are you doing, Dave? Don't just say, "Oh, I'm tired."
No, I'm pretty good. We're my wife started her new job, and we are kind of like doing interim daycare stuff. So my brother-in-law is here watching my daughter, and so we spent the day kind of learning the daycare ropes with her. So that was actually fun. She was in a great mood hanging out with her uncle all day. So I'm doing good. And then we're waiting on mixes back, which is always exciting. You know, you just checking the emails all the time, hoping to see something. No, I mean, you know, obviously I'm tired, right? But, you know, I'm doing good. I'm good and tired.
Well, the good part is the surprising part, but that is a good thing. I will say that. Now, what do you think is more, what's worse to wait for, a mix or a music video when you're getting it back and looking at your first cut here?
Okay. Well, I mean, you know the sort of the saga of what's going on behind the scenes, but in general, I think a music video, because it's like, I don't know, man. I feel like there's I recorded the song, so I know there's only so much they can do, but a music video could go anyway, right? Like, you know, it's not my area of expertise, so it's like, who knows what you're getting back.
I've been in a few. I've been cut out entirely of 2 music videos, not just me specifically, like the whole band. Like, they went out of our way to like film us, and then for whatever reason they just decided to have actors instead, and then the singer. And I was like, okay, so why did we just waste our time here? This is just, yeah. So for me, like, I don't really care about that stuff anyways. I just thought it would be funny to mention that, because I do know what's going on. But in general, I would agree with you. The music video stuff is definitely a little scary because you have less control.
It's nerve-wracking for sure. Yeah, because who knows what it's going to look like. But no, we've worked with the guy who's doing the mix and masters before, so I know what, at least baseline of what to expect, and I'm pretty excited to hear first round. I think it's gonna be cool. Plus, we purposely didn't do any demo mixing in between, so like everything I sent him is raw, and I didn't like pre-mix any of it. So we're going from nothing to, you know, full mix, which I've never done before. I'm pretty excited about.
You're going full me. That's how I do it. I don't want anything to do with mixing anything. I just track it, send it off. But speaking of new things and being excited for, you know, the first times of things, we didn't get to talk about the Pitbull audio stuff, and it was really cool. And there was a bunch of viewers who got half-price guitars, half-price hardware, half-price pickups, and I was so stoked to hear about that. And one of the guitars that I said that I got was an ESP LTD super turquoise with a pointy headstock Telecaster. And me and you we were talking, and I said I thought a cool idea for a topic would be, what's one guitar that you've always thought was kind of cool, but you didn't purchase it, or you never have, for whatever reason, whether it's you didn't think it matched, like you would look weird with it, or just genre-wise it wasn't going to be your thing. Is there any that come to mind?
Well, so I think the first easy answer is that I felt that way for probably like 10 years about tellies. You know, like I was like, nah, you know, there's something in the back of my mind that thinks they're cool, but I'm not going to do it. But actually, I think the one that really sticks out is like I've flirted with buying a Wolfgang for like a really long time. And then I have a weird thing with signatures, and I know his aren't really signatures, but they kind of are a little bit. I don't know that. And then I wish that they just made one without a tremolo, and then I would buy one. But they're a little bit weird. The headstocks are a little weird with like a little cutaway thing on the top, and you know, but they're cool guitars. I just like, I don't know, something always stops me.
What is it?
First it's the tremolo, and second it's the price. Like if I found one for a great price, I would suck it up and I would deal with the tremolo. But I think that they're always just like a little bit too much for an impulse buy. You know, like if they were like $600, like I'd buy one. But they're usually like towards the 8 to 9. You know,
could have got one for $400 if you would click my link fast.
I didn't see the Wolfgangs. I looked through the link, but
yeah, well, they only had, the deal was it was one of each, and I didn't realize this at the time. But if I had known that, then I would have, had a little bit more urgency. But that's why some of the deals were so good, because it was one of each. But one of the guitars that I did see was I think it was a black one with the kind of white binding on it, a Wolfgang that
Ooh,
went. And I was just like, that was pretty
yeah,
slick.
that'd
Yeah,
have been cool.
$400.
Yeah. I'm excited about your LTD, man. I honestly, I almost bought it when you sent me the link, but then it was the pointy headstock that turned me off. If it had a different headstock, I would have jumped on it because it was a great price. But
I'm so I don't know what I think about this guitar, dude. This guitar, on paper, makes no sense to me, like from a player's standpoint, from what I'm used to. Because first of all, it's a Telecaster, and that's cool. I love Telecasters. Probably my favorite Fender, right next to a Jaguar. The thing about it that makes it so crazy, not only is it not a Telecaster scale length, because we've seen Telecasters that have a Gibson scale length, but it's got 24 frets with the Gibson scale length. Now, I'm used... Yeah, normally when you play a 24 fret guitar, it's either 25 or 25 and a half, or even longer if you're going for something crazy like that. So I have no idea how much space I'm going to have as far as the upper frets going. How it's just going to feel like, I don't know, it's weird, man. But I'm stoked for it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
yeah, I mean, I feel like I trust LTD, like I haven't played one of their guitars that I have an issue with of any kind. So I got to assume, it's... I mean, even if the scale length's a little bit weird, it's going to be great on everything else. It just, as much of a metal guy as I am, I'm with you. I'm not into pointy headstocks. And if it just had like a regular Tele headstock, or if it was a reverse Tele headstock, I would have bought it in a heartbeat. But the pointy, like Jackson, like dinky styles, just like, it's just a real turn off for me.
It is for me too, but I got past it this time. I figured it would be, why not? How often are you going to get a chance to get that much guitar? That guitar, and we always make fun of Gibson, we make fun of PRS, and we make fun of Epiphone for not offering, Seymour Duncans or, that kind of equivalent pickups in a moderately priced thing, locking hardware, really nice ebony fretboard on it, neck through. Dude, What's not to love about this on paper?
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Yeah. And I there was a couple of those guitars that I saw that I was just like, if it was just the one thing different, like maybe I would grab it. But yeah, nothing's jumped out at me to, make me just immediately throw my credit card in. But it sounds like you got some cool stuff. But we have to get back to the question here. What's your guitar that you haven't purchased?
And this is weird. It's not going to make sense because I normally like this body style. But when I was growing up and I used to go to Parkway Music, there was two guitars that always caught my eye. One of them was a 62 Sherwood Green Fender Stratocaster for obvious reasons. It's my kind of thing. It's a vintage spec. But the one next to it was also a Stratocaster shaped body. However, it was made in Japan. It was the original. Well, not the original, but one of the original Japanese runs of the Charvel Super Strats. And it was purple flake with this gorgeous satin neck before satin neck was a thing. And it had the black hardware. And it was just so over the top. But whenever I played it, I was like, this is so cool. I'm like, I would look ridiculous with this guitar. Like, I'm not a shredder. Like, this is way too flashy for somebody like me. I mean, lo and behold, look what I grew up now. I have nothing but, like, odd colors and flashy colors and stuff like that. But at the time, I was just like, I was playing a white Strat. And I was like, this would be a little overkill. And, maybe if I wanted humbuckers, I'd want something that wasn't so much like a Fender. But that guitar, dude, you could have got one of those for like $799 back then. Now they're like over $2,000 for the same kind of ones. Or you buy the Mexican ones, which I am not a fan of. I don't make that a secret. I really think the Harley Benton Fusion with a set of pickups and you've got a better guitar for like half the price, if not just as good. So I mean, it's sad, but the Japanese Charvels, they've gone up in value by quite some bit. That would probably be the one for me, the purple one.
Yeah, I think if I gun to my head and had to buy a Super Strat, it would be a Charvel again, for sure. I really did, other than the tremolo, which is just a personal preference. I loved the Charvel that I had. It was great. We did a bunch of records with it that sounded really awesome. It just worked, just sounded great. Yeah, I thought you were gonna go weirder, but it's still a Strat at the end of the day. It's just a funny looking one.
I mean, weirder. Not so much. There's one ESP that I've always liked, but it was never released in America. It was the Horizon 3. It was similar to a model that I did have, but the finish on it was like a chameleon orange that really, really changed like big time depending on the light. And I just thought it was so gaudy and so just ugh, but I loved it at the same time. But I think the thing that saved me with that guitar is it's never for sale. And then when it comes up for sale, it's in Japan only, and it would cost me like $4,000 to $5,000 because that's like ESP Custom Shop. That's not a production guitar. So I'm fortunate in that sense that I haven't actually been tempted that hard by it. No, nothing too crazy. I was like you, but not with tellies, but with semi-hollow bodies. I hated semi-hollow bodies when I was growing up, and now I'm like they're the best. Those and tellies, they're the two best guitars.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of my others that I've been eyeing for a long time that I haven't done that is weird is a Tesco or however you say them. But those like 1960s, they're super weird, and it's something that I don't feel like I would be super comfortable playing live because I think it would just be like, it would take my hipster, kind of vibe to the next level that I'm maybe not comfortable admitting that I really am. But the reason I haven't bought one is because I've never seen one in person, and I don't really want to spend, even though they're not that expensive, I can get them for like $200 or $300. Like I worry that I buy one online and I show up and it's just a pile of shit. Like it just seems like a guitar I shouldn't buy online.
So why not just buy it and then sell it? It's not like you're gonna lose a lot of money if you get it for $200 or $300.
Yeah, but it's more the time. I don't want to like get it, hate it, and then have to do all this work to get rid of it. So one of these days I'm gonna walk into a shop and it's gonna be up on the wall and I'll be like, oh my god, this was meant to be.
Not a Guitar Center, it's not.
No, yeah, it'll have to be in another state probably. Yeah, our guitar shop quality here in Connecticut's not the best.
So I hear. That's another thing I like about Florida, dude. There are some amazing shops in this state. You got Replay Guitar Exchange in Tampa that's pretty good about getting the new stuff. You got Jimmy's Vintage, which is killer, and their prices are too good. They don't sell online. You have to actually go in and get it. Miami Guitars is super high end. As far as like the super really nice Collings, PRS, like the private stocks, that kind of stuff. Amazing for that if you have money. And then you have Wolf Guitars who have all the cool stuff in between, like the Rittenhouse guitars that are hand built in Miami, and a lot of Heritage and those kinds of brands. It's just it's funny to say this and it's sad to say this. It's infinitely better to buy a guitar here than it was in San Diego.
Yeah, it makes sense. I don't know. I don't know what it is about Connecticut. All the guitar shops I go to, they're very cool. And like, I love that they're doing that. And there's a few decent mom and pop shops around. The problem for me is just that they are not catering towards anything that I'm really looking for. So it's like, I'll walk into a place and it's just filled with Strats and Tellys, or like they only deal with like, some weird brand. And it's like basically all they have other than Squires, and it's like, it's cool. They're doing their own thing. They got their thing going. Obviously they have, some sort of relationship with these brands that they're keeping up. It's just not the kind of inventory I'm looking for, and it's not really the types of brands I'm super interested in. That being said, it's been a while since I've been to most of them, and the perennial New England problem is that everything's like way too far away, so like it's hard to justify driving an hour to go to a guitar store that I think probably doesn't have anything I'm really that interested in.
Yeah, I have a viewer. His name is Bob. Now, if Bob heard you complaining about having to drive an hour, this guy has to drive 6.5 hours to his local shop. That's the closest one. If he hears this, and he's gonna be like, he'll jump through the screen. He'll slap you. He's an old guy too. He's really funny.
All right. Well, I'm sorry, Bob. It's my first world problem is that I don't want to drive an hour.
Well, it's always like that with you. You're like, oh man, I really don't want to go to the kitchen. It's just it's so far.
It's so far. It's like 10, 15 steps away. I mean, I got time for 5.
5 max. You can always install one of those things on the stairs where it's like you sit in it and it like has the automated thing that brings you down it. That's when you know you've made it in life. When you're so fat and lazy and rich, you can buy one of those and install it when you're not actually needing it for your health. Yeah,
I mean, think of how much scrolling I could do on the way down. It's a good idea.
I bet you people do that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
On a more serious topic, well, not more serious, but I got a comment, and I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about this. This was from an older video of mine. Young lady asked me a question. She liked the Harley Benton, the SC Deluxe Goto, but she was asking me about that and a Yamaha, the 420, the RS 420, I believe, for soul or pop music. Which one would I think would be better? And I answered her, and I said, they're going to be comparable. And what I think that you should be thinking about here for nailing those kinds of tones is not the guitar, it's the amp. Because to get a convincing vintage sound, especially in that kind of thing, the guitar it's going to play a role for sure, but it's not going to do nearly as much for like that kind of vibe as an amp is going to do. So I wanted to ask you if you agree with me in this kind of general thesis I have. When you're building a rig, whether you're joining a new band or a new project or whatever have you, and you're deciding on a genre, the amp is the most important thing first, outside of anything really, as far as establishing like the core tone or matching the core tone of what you're going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So firstly, in the comparison, I vote Yamaha. I think Yamaha's like really underrated, honestly. I think they have cool guitars, and I think in literally everything they do, Yamaha kind of sort of shoots themselves in the foot with the brand thing by the fact that they make literally everything. It's like they make these really cool products, like especially like their electronic drums. Like obviously they make great pianos, they make great guitars, but it's like, but they also make motorcycles. So it's like, they never kind of like come to the forefront of what you think of when you're thinking about like a specific product line. So anyway, obviously they are probably comparable in playability and in whatever the goal is, but I think the Yamaha's cooler, but to your thesis, absolutely. I think you have to assume that the guitar is playable, right? That you're comfortable playing it, and then you're only talking about tone. Yes. Then definitely a shitty guitar into a great amp is going to sound good. A great guitar into a great amp is going to sound great, but a great guitar into a shitty amp is going to sound shitty, like it definitely. And especially if you're talking about tone matching, I mean, I would argue that there's very little you can do from a guitar end to make a tone sound like someone else if the amp doesn't already get you in that ballpark. So definitely 100% agree.
Yeah, and I was down that road for many years, and it took me a lot of trial and error to figure this lesson out on my own. I was trying to get really aggressive rock out of that Vox AC4, and I couldn't figure out. I was just like, look, I am throwing like 3 gain pedals in front of this thing. I'm diming the gain. I'm just not getting what I want out of it. And I was much younger at that time, but I mean, it really dawned on me because then I played. I forget what it wasn't a Mesa. It might have been a Soldano. Yeah, I think it was a Soldano at the Good Guitar Center in Orlando, the one that you had to drive down I-4 to get to, the one that actually had good stuff in stock.
Yeah.
I played a Soldano, and a cheap ESP. But when the EC1000s were like $500, I used one of those through a Soldano, and I was like, "Holy shit!" My balls just hit the floor. I was like, "This is the craziest thing! Like, this is the answer to all of the world's problems." But it was $3,000 at the time, I think, and I was like, I was broke. I was still a college kid, but it really opened my eyes to being like, oh man, like the amp really has so much to do with it. And I think it's been a blessing and a curse having the Music Man this whole time, because I've been so spoiled with the clean tone. But it's also, I've liked that amp so much that I've tried to get it to do things I shouldn't try and get it to do. And I know that a lot of people like getting their dirt tones from pedals in front of super clean amps like that. I hate it. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like that at all either. Yeah, I take that back. I would agree with you. I think in the world of the super heavy distortion, there have been some really great preamp pedals that are designed to go through effects loop that I think you could argue do the job well. But they're kind of a different pedal. It's kind of, it's not putting it through, the preamp and making it work. It's really like adding another channel to your amp.
And that's different in 2 ways, though. First of all, you're talking about something that's going in the effects loop, and that's kind of designed for doing what you said, adding a second channel. And then the second part is a lot of the people that are doing what we were just talking about, they're not using amps that have effects loops. Like that Music Man doesn't have an effects loop. A Fender Deluxe Reverb does not have an effects loop. A Twin doesn't. A Princeton doesn't. And a Blues Junior don't. Those are the majority of the amps that people try and, they get it as their first like good amp, whatever. But then they try and add pedals to it to try and get it to sound like a Marshall. That's why all these brands like Wampler have been able to make a killing selling plexis in a box.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And, they do decent things. Like I think if you're looking for specific types of sound, you can do them with them, but yeah, I will also say I think a caveat here too is that having an amp that does distortion well or does a gain channel well, I think is less. I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. Like having a clean amp that sounds great is I think more important to that type of sound than having an amp with decent distortion. I think an amp with decent distortion is able to be shaped in a way that a clean amp isn't, right? So like if you're talking about like what's the most important thing to your tone, like you can get away with a mid-tier just gain heavy amplifier. But like if you're going for a certain type of clean sound, like you need to go for that type of clean sound with that type of amp. And I think there's like not a lot of wiggle room there. Like if you want Fender cleans, you got to get Fender cleans. If you want, Vox just edge a breakup, you got to get Vox just edge a breakup. Like if I want like super heavy Mesa sounds, like there's a bunch of amps I can get that will get me pretty fucking close, So it's weird. Like, yeah, I think you're totally right. You're never really going to get there with the pedal before the preamp on a clean. But once you get into the distortion world, like you can fudge a little bit more, I think, than you can if you're strictly staying in the clean world.
And another reason I agree with that assessment of it is because when you're actually editing in a mix, and once you really introducing gain, you're going to have more than one gain track on 99% of the time. Even if something sounds a little bit thin or weak, so to speak, you pan it with a second take and you double track it, even with the same guitar, just a different take, it's going to make it sound gigantic in the hands of the right professional kind of engineer or something like that. But I just that clean tone, man, that there's nowhere to hide with that. That's the other thing, and that's why it is so vital. It's just, and that's why whenever I do these guitar comparisons, people sometimes they'll comment like, why don't you do high gain? I'm like, because if I do high gain, it doesn't matter what guitar I'm using at that point. You're losing all of the characteristics of the guitar. Once you hit a certain threshold, it just becomes whatever. That's why some people like the guy from No Effects, oh my god, I'm blanking on his name, uses a Telecaster, but you would never know it because there's just so much damn gain happening. It could pass for a Les Paul.
Speaking of this too, actually, there was something I wanted to bring up here, and I'm struggling a little bit to find what this guy's name is. If I do find it, maybe we can list it later. But he's a relatively small YouTuber that I just saw pop up in my feed the other day, and he did a really interesting video where he was talking about what actually affects the sound of a guitar, right? And he literally just was like, okay, I'm going to take a guitar and I'm going to rip away everything until we get to the point where the sounds are different, right? And he literally took the head of a guitar and he put it on one side of a table, and then he screwed a bridge to another side of the table and left the strings completely open in between. So there's no guitar body, there's no guitar neck. All it is tuning heads and a bridge and the electronics. And it's the same electronics as he has in another Strat that he has, right? He plays a chord, and he plays a chord on the other one, and they sound fucking identical. Like, identical. Literally can't tell the difference between them at all, right? And it's just like this perfect, metaphor for, or a perfect example, right, for why every time somebody's like, oh, you got to have, ash, or you got to have pot, or whatever, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. Like nothing. And when it comes down to the core of it, it's your bridge and it's your electronics and it's the scale length, and that's it. Those are the only things that make a difference. But it's super interesting. I know this is a little bit off topic from what we're talking about, but it's kind of in the, what matters to tone sort of discussion. I'll have to show you the link to the video, but I'm curious. I have totally said like woods matter to the tone, and now I kind of feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm just kind of full of shit,
I've always been in the camp of I think wood is extremely important, but not for that reason. I think it has to do with the durability as far as how it's going to do in various climates. And to me, the thing that I always thought about when I was picking out different pieces of wood per guitar, how much was it going to weigh?
Yeah,
Because some
absolutely.
wood is going to have a tendency to be heavier and more dense than other wood, so I would kind of steer away from that. So, like a Telecaster, like we had the Troublemaker Telecaster in for a little bit. That was all African mahogany telly, and that one was kind of light. But the first one I had of that was like 9.5 pounds. So it's like to me that guitar was unkeepable, but based on that alone. So it's kind of like, when you're buying a Telecaster, that's one thing that you keep in mind, and that's part of the reason, outside of tradition, that things like Swamp Ash are still kind of sought after, and why when PRS specifically they recently released the Mayor in the SEs, those are poplar, and a lot of people lost their shit. And they're like, oh, they're cheaping out. They're doing this. And I'm like, dude, you would never hear the difference in a mix. You would
Never.
never
Never.
hear the
Yeah.
difference in a mix.
Yeah. I think I think you're kind of hitting on it too, right? Like what the point of it is that, and actually he does a super interesting follow-up video where he starts talking about what makes a difference in sustain, right? And it's about whatever you feel, right? Like it's about how the guitar feels, and then that informs how you think it sounds, right? So like, if I think that a heavier bridge is giving me more sustain, like it's probably, even if it is adding anything, it's so marginal it doesn't matter. But if it makes me feel that way, then I'm going to play it like it has more sustain. Therefore, it does, even if it really scientifically isn't doing anything at all. And it's the same thing here, right? Where it's like, okay, the body type isn't really going to like do anything for the tone, but if I feel like it's heftier and I feel like it's giving me more low end, then I'm going to play it like it has more low end, and therefore it kind of does.
Yes, and I think a perfect example of that, I have two custom shop offsets that are the same scale length. They're both 24 inch scale length guitars, the Jaguar and the Mustang. And when I sit and I play them, I have a very different approach to them. And you wouldn't think so because, like I said, they have the same scale length. The major differences between the two of them are the vibrato system. That's where things get a little bit squirrely. But because of the way I have the vibrato system set up on the Mustang, this is the way I like it. You could alter this if you wanted to get it closer to be like the Jag and vice versa. But I have it really slinky. So the strings feel like spaghetti. And for certain kinds of playing, it's like, oh, this is amazing. But at the end of the day here, if I wanted to set those two guitars up as close as I could in terms of the way they would feel, there wouldn't be that much in it outside of that way that the vibrato itself kind of interacts. And it kind of just, furthers your point.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought it was super interesting. I mean, I think every guitar player at some point is kind of guilty of believing in these myths of whatever it is that's happening in your guitar, that it's making a huge difference. And, again, at the end of the day, it's preference, and it's how it feels to you and how you play it or whatever. But I just thought it was super interesting to actually see it in practice, and then really think about like at the end of the day, what are these things that affect tone? And the first thing he says when he starts talking about the sustain things is the major factor in sustain is what you're doing to the amp, right? Like, and if you have distortion on, because that's all it's gonna pull up all your sustain for you, right? And then it's just like all the stuff that we waste all this time on sometimes is just hysterical how little it really does, but it makes you feel like it does so much.
Yeah, well, the only parameter of a test that I like to use where I can tell if a guitar is cheaply made or if a guitar is really well made is how well it rings out acoustically, how long it rings out acoustically for. That's going to tell me a lot of how much cost cutting was involved and how much somebody actually may have put in a ton of effort into building that instrument. And I'm with you on this one. And like I said, we've all been guilty of this to an extent. There's just certain things I really hate, like when you have like 4 pieces of wood in the body of a Epiphone Les Paul. I think that's an abomination. Like that's just like going out of your way to make like a shittier guitar on purpose to say, I don't know. I don't like that stuff. Like I'd rather have like a 1 piece, but like a 2 piece, it's like, I don't care about that. It's just like once you start really cutting the cost, it's like I would assume, even though tonally you could still probably get to the same kind of ballpark, I would just assume go for something that is put together, a little bit better. And also, because when you have something that you feel like somebody put a lot of effort into and really cared about when they were making it, no matter what the price is of the brand, you kind of treat it with a little bit different respect. Like, think about your old Benton. That was like a throw around thing. You know what I mean? Like, you were like, whatever. If it drops off a stand, it drops off a stand. Whereas, like the PRS you have, if that falls off, you'd be like, oh shit, like this sucks. The pink one, you'd be like, you're really bummed out if something happened to that, because it's just perception. Even though they could sound similar, like just one feels like it has a little bit more put into it as far as from the construction standpoint. And I don't know, I think that's part of the reason why, because when I did the test between the two Telecasters, the Made in Japan hybrid and the custom shop, I greatly prefer the custom shop, and it's a feel thing, but tonally, I mean, not much in it. Not much in it at all. Yeah. Certainly not $3,000 or $4,000 between the new prices.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Audiomo podcast. I will see you guys tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the weekly Thursday live stream. Hope you have a good rest of your day.